Welcome to the Last in Line podcast, where we discuss faith, hope, and truth in the lives of amazing servant leaders. You are in the right place if you crave purpose and if you hunger for a life of significance. This podcast applies biblical truth to our daily lives, and we pray that you walk away encouraged and inspired. This is the Last in Line podcast.
Hey, it's a privilege to welcome our guest today, Mr. Roy Wooten, who is the executive director of the Crucible Project. Roy has a bachelor's and a master's in clinical and counseling psychology from Abilene Christian University. He has served as a pastor, ministry executive, a coach, a counselor for nonprofits and churches. He has a significant body of work in Christian relationships and received an honorary doctorate from Grace Global Seminary in 2017. He and his wife serve in ministry together in San Antonio, Texas. He is an author of a book called Unstuck, 7 Steps to Break Free and Live Courageously, specifically what we're going to talk about today. He and his wife have written books on marriage. He's written a book on fatherhood. Again, he started serving with what's called the Crucible Project, which is a fellowship ministry, a discipleship, mentorship program of a weekend for men to come and unload their baggage, identify wounds, dismiss those, kill those, put those to death, and get honest with each other, which allows them to then become who they've been called to be. And what's been paralyzing them and preventing them from walking into their true purpose and calling has been their past in most cases. And so he and his team create an environment, create experiences for these guys to get free from any bondage, from any weights, from any scars, any shame. This setting of the Crucible Project and these weekends that they provide are crucial in that. He and I talk about what that project is about, why he started serving in 2009 there, and really had a fire in his heart to help men in this capacity. And we talk about some chapters in the book about breaking free, about identity, about shame, about really taking responsibility for certain things. And Roy gets pretty transparent and vulnerable about his past, his childhood, and some mental health issues his mother experienced throughout his childhood, and how he coped with that, how he dealt with it growing up in a Christian home, how he reconciled those two, and really how he became a protector for his sibling and a protector then as he became an adult for other men, other people in his counseling work. So it's been a privilege to get to know him. It was a great conversation. You guys are going to get a lot from it, and you're going to know somebody you need to share this with. So please do. We're going to put the link for Crucible Project in the notes so that you can share it or that you can attend. They're doing these all over the country, hundreds of them throughout the year. So with that, help me welcome Mr. Roy Wooten to Last in Line podcast. Roy Wooten, welcome to Last in Line podcast. We are glad to have you here, sir.
Excited to be here. Excited to be connecting with you, John.
Well, it's cool how things happen, and social media is a valuable tool when used properly. So thank all of the algorithms and thank all of the people on your end that reached out, and glad we can make this work. It was kind of a quick turnaround, actually, from the time they reached out to us being able to both be available. So I am pretty familiar. I crash coursed some of your material. I can't promise that I read cover to cover all your written materials, but I do want to talk about 2 big projects that you've done, a book that you did, and then I guess I call it a discipleship model, but it's a fellowship, discipleship, mentorship, coaching through Crucible Project. So you become a very prominent figure in their leadership team. So before we get into the weeds, the good kind of weeds, maybe give us a safe landing zone when it comes to your background and sort of your upbringing from a spiritual standpoint, and kind of how your professional life took off in the early days.
Sure. Yeah. I grew up out in West Texas and was in a home where mom and dad had a church almost every Sunday. It was rare that we'd miss. It was really important that we were like taught. We competed in something called Bible bowls and different kinds of competitions around Bible knowledge as I grew up. So being at church, being involved at church was just a part of who I was. And I played football for a team that a guy came and hung out with us and the team after us and wrote a book about that became a movie, Friday Night Lights. And so football was part of my, I guess you call it leadership development, process. And went off to Abilene Christian University, played football, but also thought I'd be a pastor. End up moving to psychology and staying and get my master's. So trained both as a counselor and a pastor. And my whole career has been around helping people change. Did a few years right off the bat to get my license at a psychiatric hospital. People sometimes ask, but I was on the staff there. And then I spent the rest of my career trying to help people, move through the rough spots of life, sitting with people in their darkest moments, et cetera.
Wow.
I was 26 when I became the first time I was an executive director of a nonprofit. I had 2 treatment centers, men's or adolescent boys and adolescent girls unit, and then ran Texas' largest children's home for about 10 years. That was a challenging and exciting thing to do. It led through a culture shift so that we moved away from very punitive things to more trauma-informed ways of dealing with children who have been abused and neglected. And spent the last 14 years before coming to this role with Crucible with a startup, just a couple of part-time counselors whenever we began, Shield Bearer Counseling Centers in Houston, and grew it to, I think we had over 30 counselors in 7 locations in the greater Houston area when I left, providing a lot of services to trauma survivors, sex traffic survivors, veterans, et cetera. So it was hard to leave that spot. I really enjoyed the work I was doing there and thought I would retire there, but I felt God's calling to the position that I'm in now.
Yeah. Man, I tell you, there's such a need, and I don't have to tell you the rise in just the mental dysfunction and dishealth that's out there. I mean, we're just coming off of June, which I find ironic that Pride Month is the same month as Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I don't know. It just seemed odd to me. But anyway, men specifically is who you're talking to today. And man, I'm glad to have you because I think right off the heels of, the mental health awareness, May and June, really, and it just seems to be at its highest point in our society. My son is getting his degree and then going to get a master's degree in biblical guidance and counseling. And so we are very much in tune with the need of that. So I'm glad you're here. I need to ask too, I guess, when you get involved in, and we might lump a lot of this together because Unstuck and the Crucible Project, I think your book Unstuck, I think they have some obvious overlap and some obvious crossover. So we're probably going to just compile a lot of this in one big conversation. But tell us maybe what got you passionate about it. Was it a personal experience that you had or somebody close to you, or what kind of stirred that up in you and realizing A, that was a mission of yours, and B, that it was a gift?
Yeah, so whenever I was 5, my nurturing and loving mother had her first psychotic break. And our home turned from a warm and loving place to a place that was dangerous. My job that first week of hell in my life was trying to protect my little brother, trying to soothe my mom and dad. And one of my earliest memories is I'm sitting in the back of a squad car holding on to my little brother. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my dad on the porch with the lawman. It's a Texas lawman, so he's got a hat on and everything.
Yeah.
with some papers and asking questions on the porch. And then my mom is screaming and yelling. She's tied up on a gurney and being put in an ambulance. And it was in that moment that later I realized that Satan whispered that you're not good enough. You're not worthy of love. And the only way that you can really be accepted and loved is to do for others. It was like I was there with no one taking care of me, and I was trying to take care of everyone else. I lived out of that. And it helped my career to live out of that because I was always doing, achieving, athletically, academically, and then in my career. And I went through some counseling in my undergrad years, and it was helpful, helped kind of put some bows on some things for me, helped me set some boundaries with my family. But it wasn't until I went through a retreat experience that my brother-in-law had called and said, "Hey man, you got to check out what the Crucible Project is doing. Promise Keepers was like a mile wide and an inch deep, but what they're doing at Crucible is about a mile deep, and you got to come check it out." So I went to the weekend with things seemingly well in my life, with my wife, with my children, in my career. People would look at me and say, "That's a successful guy." And God dealt with me with some things on that Friday night of how that old wound back there was still influencing my leadership, not only of the ministry I was running, but also in my family and really leading myself. And it was such an aha for me that I started volunteering immediately for this ministry, eventually leading some of the retreats, and the last 6 years serving as the CEO, executive director.
Yeah. I mean, I usually, to go into your line of work, I would think most cases it hits home with a particular person at some point in their life. It affected somebody close to them, in proximity to them, related to them, even them personally. So I had I thought there might be a tie there, and that does drive you, right, to make it mean something to everybody that you speak to, because of how close it was to you. Now, I guess, so there's a lot of these. I say a lot. Can't name every one of them, and I know you certainly don't know the ins and outs of all these programs that are similar to Crucible. But what would you say maybe differentiates your program, if you do know kind of how it is different than some of the others? What sets the Crucible Project apart? What's maybe different about y'all's mission? Because y'all are digging deep, and I know there are a lot of other organizations that have events that do that. So give me kind of a 20,000-foot view of what makes it different.
Yeah, so I've never witnessed anything that helped people change so effectively than the series of experiences. And when I say experiences, that's what we're doing that's different. This isn't a come and sit and learn more about God, or learn more about Jesus and hear what the definition of a man, a godly man, what godly masculinity is. Where we are beginning with the idea that you already know some aspects of that, but you're struggling with something that's keeping you from being all that God's called you to be. There's some desire of yours to do something and be something different. And so many men, like, recent study, I guess it's 2 or 3 years old now, said American isolation is an epidemic, right? We have an epidemic in isolation. 1 in 5 men can't name one friend. 1 in 5. 3 in 5 can't name more than 5. And in leadership, isolation is, common. It's lonely at the top, right? And so what we're doing through our series of exercises, God is using to get healing in the broken places, bring awareness to where you're blaming and complaining instead of living in responsibility, and really taking responsibility for the life, the marriage, the family that you're leading. stepping into out from behind the shadows, but also looking back in my past to where those things that formed me may be playing out in ways today. I think about Joseph. Joseph had some things happen to him that were not his fault. It wasn't his fault. His brothers put him in a pit and sold him. There were things that he had some responsibility for along the way, bad things that happened. But God was with him through it. And I don't think God caused it to happen, but God used it powerfully. What was meant for evil, God used it for good. And we are helping each man who comes on our weekend take a hard look at their lives, to take a look at what's working and what's not working, and to look at patterns, to get unstuck in some area in their life, to go back so that we can go forward in a new way. And man after man, now we're over 8,000 men have been through our weekends, graduated, about 25, 30 men at a time total. So it's a smaller space than what a lot of men's retreats are doing. But we have so much individual and small group work in the weekend. It's so powerful. I've led for a long time. I'm now 57, so 26 to 57. That's a lot of years leading businesses and ministries. And one thing I know for sure is that if I don't give my space time to work on whatever God's got me stewarding, and I just work in it, then I miss a bunch of things, and I'm off kilter. I'm not visual in line with my vision and achieving the bigger picture things for the ministry or the company I'm leading. I believe that we as leaders need to do that for ourselves. We need to take a step back, to not be in our lives, but to look at our lives from the outside. And we give men an opportunity on our weekend to do that so that they can do something different and not keep repeating patterns.
Yeah. No, that's crucial. And I mean, that you gotta, it's almost like it's not almost, it is, there's things that have to come before the next thing. And you have to kind of dig and uncover and come to terms with, and maybe even name something, and then, have a funeral for it and move past it. So you can't skip steps in, I would think, the healing process and the restoration process. Now, specifically for your situation, I'll ask, and I want to know if you see this being fairly common in the groups at the Crucible Project that you've seen. So when you were young and had the issue with your mom, now I don't know where that went from there, if she was radically healed, it was a process, if she had to spend some time away. I don't know how that ended, but did you ever find yourself being mad at God for the situation? Because you were a Christian, and of course that had to be confusing as a child. And I wonder, is that a major hinge point for guys when they step away from their faith? If it's that scar that they didn't come to terms with, but also that they felt maybe God turning his back on them, or just kind of left them abandoned, and why them kind of thing. So does that relate to your story at all?
It does. Now, my anger at God, or blaming God for what I went through, what I was going through throughout my childhood. By the way, she would go away in the 70s. They'd take her to a psych hospital. They didn't have the meds that they have today. And then she'd be back home within a few months. And my dad was working in the oil fields, the oil patch. And so we would be kind of farmed out to friends or relatives, my brother and I, until mom got back. And then we were back in the home. And things would be good for a while. And then it would go, her symptoms would show up again. There's this old saying, when a family member has a mental illness has the family. And we were all affected by the horrible, mental disorder that my mom has. And so I had a number of ways of trying to figure out, like, I had some crazy ideas, like somebody had taken my mom away and they replaced her with someone else, because my mom would never do that. So I made up some stories throughout my childhood, but it never really was at God. It was in my, I guess you could say, my early 20s when I kind of deconstructed my faith and reconstructed it in today's terminology. That I realized that I was hanging on to some anger. I do believe this over and over again. When we have men going through our weekends, what we discover is not that the devil out there, still killing and destroying, and that it's the devil's fault that men are in the messes in their relationships and in their life, but it is their lack of awareness of their power and giving too many choices away, being distracted, and it's other things that they put between them and God. So I've seen this over and over again where the barrier is some wound that's related to church, not related to God. But they've thrown that wound onto God as if God was the one who did it, and they've thrown God out instead of realizing that the church is just a bunch of imperfect people, right? Trying to live out their faith, and they do it imperfectly. Church wounds are really one of the drivers and part of my holy discontent with the situation of isolation in leadership, particularly in church leadership, that we have a pastor, it seems like a month, that's blowing up their calling. And I want to get to that guy before he blows it all and have him come experience what we're doing at the Crucible Project to deal with this stuff so that it doesn't come out in the worst ways. One of my friends, Mark Beebe, was the CEO of C12, Christian entrepreneur groups all over the U.S. And he said, number one, our flaws as leaders are magnified. So whatever personal flaws we have are magnified in our leadership. And the other thing, until we transform ourselves, we really cannot transform fully our organization, whatever we're running.
Yeah.
And so if we can get to pastors who are living unaware before they let the patterns show up in their life in a way that hurts a lot of people's faith, then we want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. And, for speaking about guys and wounds, and nobody gets free until they get honest, I've heard somebody say. And just like therapy and any counseling, any program, rehabilitation, it's only as good as the level of transparency that the actual patient is. And so what ways are you guys finding that are maybe nuanced or unique in any way that are getting guys to feel comfortable and safe and being authentically open about things? Because they can walk away and high five everybody and say, hey, you might see you next summer or whatever, or maybe we'll keep in touch, but they still are holding on to that one thing. Maybe in your groups they're not. What's allowing them to let all of it go?
From the moment that they pull onto the property for our retreat on Friday night, the experiences begin that help push them inside. And we don't give a lot of time for men to sit around and, describe their position or their toys or the things that we like to kind of define
posture. Yeah.
Right. We go right at posing right off the bat on Friday night. Friday night is challenging. And we challenge men on purpose because I think that most men have never been challenged to the point where they feel confident that they truly are a man. And so Friday night's challenging. And then Saturday, we lead by example. So almost every single experience that we have, I said it's a series of experiences. It's someone coming up and giving a 10-minute or so teach piece, followed by 2 or 3 models modeling what we want them all to do. And then now everyone in the room gets a chance to do it. And that modeling, I believe, is why men are going, going ahead and going for it. I do believe every person in the world has a need to be fully seen and known, fully known and seen, and still be loved.
That's right.
And where we are told as young boys, boy, don't you cry, boy, don't you, I'll give you something to cry about, or
That's right.
don't be a wimp. We make fun of weakness, other boys' weaknesses, and so we end up stuffing a bunch of stuff, and we're not real around other men. We're kind of scared around it. And Satan loves it because he's got us in isolation. So we'll talk about sports. We'll talk sometimes about career, not everything. We'll talk a little bit about the wife, sometimes in a negative way, and share. But we really don't get real. I mean, we don't come to church and say during the prayer request, hey, I need prayers for, we don't know what to do. My 12-year-old came home smelling like pot. And, this is our first. We just hide it. We hide so much. And so on our weekend, we give men an opportunity, well, first by showing them, modeling the vulnerability so that everyone gets a chance to just be real, to take the mask off, to stop posing, There's a great illustration in the Garden of Eden where Adam and Eve have sinned and God comes looking for them, and they're hiding behind trees and they've covered themselves up with leaves, and they were naked and unashamed before. And now they're hiding behind things. And I think as boys, we learned we better hide. We better hide from others. We better hide from God. And as adults, we got all kinds of things we hide behind. Our position, our, like I said, our toys, our, how big our muscles are, whatever. And instead of getting real, and we break those barriers down Friday night, Saturday, the men, it's rare that someone isn't real already Saturday morning, and they leave. After a weekend is over, the last thing they do is they come and visit with me or one of our other leaders, and we ask them, did you get what you came for? And are you willing to take that and be God's man in the world? And it is like 1 out of 200 that might say no.
Yeah.
So man after man, God's using us. And on the other side of the weekend, we have groups and we have coaching to support the continued work around, whatever issues that they brought.
Yeah. What advice? And it sounds amazing. I'm getting more interested as we talk. I was already kind of intrigued when I was reading about it because, the world needs more of it. And I'm certainly, that's kind of strumming a chord with me, just hearing what you guys are doing for guys, because I have a heart to see guys healed. What about guys that, man, everything they touch turns to gold, right? What's your advice to, it's not that you're trying to convince, but encourage them to take that step to experience a weekend like that when they're really honest, they know that there's some things they could grow in, and spiritually for sure, but maybe even relationally and emotionally they could grow in, but they haven't been a train wreck. Everything they do really is kind of successful. To me, that's the worst guy, is the one that's got nothing going on where he needs something like this. You hear that good is the enemy of great. I think doing okay and being successful, quote unquote, is kind of the enemy of our growth as men and stepping into the fullness of our potential. What's your advice to a guy like that might need some extra kick in the britches, like to go experience it?
Yeah, I'll tell you this story. 67-year-old, highly successful by the world standards man, married to the same woman his whole adulthood, 3 children. He had a company doing a couple $100 million a year in sales, so it was a successful business. But his wife and daughters were telling him, please retire, please sell the company, please exit, and we miss you, we want you around, you spend too much time doing that, the grandkids need to be around you. But he just couldn't let it go. He couldn't let it go. This is one of these guys who looks good in every way, leader, church leader, not pastor, church leader, etc. And he told a story about being picked up by his dad, who would take him to his baseball games frequently, almost every game. And it didn't matter what he did. He hit a home run. He pitched well. He played second base well, etc. He would get in the car, and all the way home, his dad, trying to help him be a better baseball player, would give him notes about how he could have done this better, that better, etc. And with tears in his eyes, he said, "This is what's driven me. I'm still looking for my dad to say, 'attaboy,' right?" And why he can't give up the highly successful business that he has, and why he keeps changing the mark from this much in the bank to that much more in the bank. Because if he's not doing and achieving, he's never going to get that attaboy. And he was able to, through one of our processes, hear some things from God for himself, and also say some things to that little boy that he had inside of him, and to say the things that he always wanted to hear. So I think the reason that I'm successful was both the bad, both the good that came from the wound that I had in my childhood. Like, you would look at me and say I was successful in every way when I went through my weekend, and that being driven by that is not a good way to live. They're striving all the time, etc. So what I'm doing now, I'm not moving from that place. I'm moving from a different place in my life. Now, I know I am worthy of love, and I am a lovable guy. I know that I am good enough. And now I'm moving and doing what I'm doing because I desperately desire to see the changes in other men that I've got to experience for myself and in the world around. And one of the reasons why I wrote the book Unstuck is, how can we take some of our teachings and put it in the hands of somebody who reads? Like, I wrote it for guys who don't read much. It's an easy read. It's a small read. And we have it available on our website. If you go to thecrucibleproject.org, you can go down and get a PDF version for free just by giving us your name and email address.
Yep. It's as easy as that. I'm living proof. I did enjoy that on the PDF. I don't know even how to measure. I'm a fairly good reader. Like, I read a little bit, right? I read quite a bit, I guess, compared to some standards, and not as much as others. But I would ask, so going through and where you are now, I mean, you've dealt with a lot inside yourself. You've gotten rid of some baggage. You've stepped into leadership for years, decades, and now you're helping guys. You're being kind of that sage for guys who were where you used to be. Now, what would you say now at this season of life? And I'm going to get into Unstuck, the book, a little further here in a second. But what do you think God is maybe reshaping in you, maybe forging in you right now? Something He's working on you about? Can you be transparent about this season for you?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things. One is I've been type A my whole lifetime, my whole career, athletics, etc. Whatever I do, I'm going full blast at, and God's kind of opened my eyes to this idea that now I know people learn from what I do more than what I say. And I know that my children learned more from what they saw me do than what I said. But it was an aha this last year, as I see all of my staff just working so hard, to realize that even though I'm telling them, you need to turn your phones off at 5, 6, whatever your last meeting is, and you need to take weekends off, etc., that I don't really live that way. And I'm either like, oh, all fun, in a vacation or all work. So this is an aha that there's some work for me to do around that. But the biggest is I never thought I would even consider retiring. Right, retirement is, I've always said it's not in the Bible. Why would I ever do it? It doesn't seem like fun. But I had a grandchild 2.5 years ago, my first. I've got another one on the way this December. And it's like I want to spend more and more time with him and with them as I collect more. And so maybe there is a retirement that's in the future, but it's like not lack of purpose, but my purpose is shifting to also be about this other generation, this family tree of mine as I continue to, lead the family.
Yeah.
So those are the things. Those are the things that I'm thinking about. I want to visit just a second about confession. This idea that evangelical churches in the U.S. have given up on confession. James 5:16 says,
yep.
confess your sins one to another for healing. And there's something incredibly powerful about getting real about what's going on in my life. I was 24 when I became a father. I was 20 when I got married, 24 when I became a dad. And I was teaching Sunday school in the discipleship model at the church where I was a part of, and in adult Sunday schools, and engaged in a small group at the house, etc. And my wife, we had a lot of fun in those 4 years. I mean, we were young marrieds and no kids. And then all of a sudden, every cell in her body was all about my little boy. Mm-hmm. And it was like crickets as far as me in her life, right? I was there to help her take care of him and earn, and provide. So I started noticing women that I never noticed before. I started paying more attention to, and you're probably too young for this, but back in the day, there were circulars that would come in the mail, Sears and Roebuck and others. Yeah. And, they had the swimsuit edition and those had never really caught my eye that much, but all of a sudden now I'm paying more attention to that stuff. And I went and talked to my pastor, and he said, I really never struggled with that. And let me get you with some of our church leadership. So I met them on a Saturday morning, and we're having coffee, and they've got their Bibles. And I said, look, how did you handle this adjustment in your life where your wife, post-pregnancy, the first year or so of being a mom, just didn't have any energy for, kind of marital stuff? Yeah. And both of them looked at me and said they didn't really ever struggle with that. And as a young man, and a leader, I just thought, number one, something's wrong with me because I'm different. And number two, I better not ever tell anyone that for the rest of my life. Right? I mean, I better never tell
I got to jump in there because I got to say, A, they're lying, or B, they have a different definition of struggle. So just because they're managing it doesn't mean they don't deal with it. So
no,
go ahead.
They were lying. They were lying.
Yeah,
right. And there was face saving kinds of and I think people people don't know how to answer sometimes questions. So posing is better than being honest. And that's right. And it's not. Look, I don't want any man to ever get that kind of response from a church leader again. And certainly they're not going to get that from me. And Crucible's doing something about it.
That's good.
Crucible's doing something about that. So that confessional living authentically with each other isn't something that, it's just a part of our culture post-weekend.
That's good. Yeah. Glad you added that because, I think guys can sometimes feel like they're being super honest and super transparent, but we all kind of have still that little thing in our back pocket, right? That we're not completely sure we want to share. And so that, the part of that scripture that I really like, because there's a reason that it comes after that is the fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. I mean,
That's
that
right.
means aggressively, if you look up fervent, aggressive prayer of a righteous man avails much. Not a perfect man, but a guy who's trying to be righteous. Things come out of that. Fruit comes out of that. There's a harvest to bear from that. So I mean, I think that's one of my favorite verses, passages of all. But so if we, I got to ask before we get into Unstuck, I promise we're getting there. Were you, I'm going to take a stab at this. Were you an offensive lineman?
I was. Yes, I was a
Okay.
big boy, up front,
Well,
center.
I wasn't
Yeah.
going off of size. I was going off of your story. I was going off because you have that blindside Michael Orr kind of protector instinct, right? Off the charts.
Right.
If you were to take a test, and that's what his was. And so you mentioned how much of a protector you were of your younger sibling. And so that's what hit me immediately is, oh, he's an offensive lineman for sure. So, yeah, good for you, man. All right. So Unstuck, 7 steps to break free and live courageously. I got to ask basic questions. I'm a simple guy. I'm going to get simple.
Yeah.
What does it even look like to live courageously?
So, fear is, I believe, a God-given emotion, just like all of our other emotions. So, Jesus, I think, expressed fear in being in the gardens with sweat drops of blood. I think fear, if you live there, you camp out, and that's where you do life from, is the spirit of fear, not the spirit of power that Paul tells Timothy to watch out for. So any of our emotions can cause us to sin. There's a be angry and sin not. Anger isn't in and of itself isn't the sin. It's what we do with it that's the problem. So realizing that fear is God's way of like letting us know that something's scary out there, and also coming to the realization that my radar around what might be scary or fearful for me is probably broken in some way. Like we go through life, we experience some things, and our radar gets bent a little bit. So one guy can look at 5 guys can look at the same situation, and only one of them might be fearful about whatever it is that they're doing. The thing that I write about in one of the chapters in this book is most of the time when we're not in action, facing our fear and doing it anyway. Courage isn't moving without fear. Courage is noticing our fear and going anyway. The thing that keeps us stuck is the risk that something bad is going to happen. And usually while we stay stuck in the thing that we're afraid, because we're afraid something might happen, we are actually creating the thing that we're afraid might happen. Right. So my wife and I are in a challenging part in our relationship, and I want to talk to her about it. I want to say, look, this is a problem. And I really, maybe it's a boundary that I want to set with her, or maybe it's a request that I have of her. But then I don't have the conversation. I don't have the hard, courageous conversation because I'm afraid that might mess up like the equilibrium that we're in right now. And so I'd rather just kind of stay here because it's too dangerous for me to move through the fear and ask the question. But in reality, while I go through life with that issue still running inside of me, the relationship doesn't change. And it often is leading to the very thing that I think might have it. So it makes our relationship unhealthier.
Yeah.
It makes our relationship more strained as we go. So being courageous is noticing our fear and going anyway, right?
Yeah.
Take an assessment of the risk and going for it. Having the hard conversation with our child or our teen that we've been avoiding. It's having the conversation with our boss that we've been avoiding. It's stepping into owning that this is my choice and I have the power to do something here. And when I don't act on it, I still have the power, but in some ways I'm just giving it away. I'm deciding not to act and to live in the fear.
Yeah.
So that's how I would answer that.
For sure. And I mean, that applies in every area, every bucket of life. I mean, Jesus promised we were going to have tribulation, right? But he overcame the world. So we're called to lean in to it. It talks about suffering quite a bit in the Bible, how that's just part of the deal as a Christian, as a Christ follower. So people that are fearful of struggle or adversity or fearful of that next unknown thing, like you said, they create the hypothetical that then in their mind becomes the reality that it's already a catastrophe, and then they're paralyzed by it when it hadn't even happened yet. And I talk a lot
That's
about that
right.
on the podcast. So it's a common theme out there. And so if we go into some of the 7 steps, I just want to get, for sake of time, I'm only going to cover a couple probably, but I mean,
Yeah.
I know there's 7, but I want to combine maybe 2 of them that I thought might have some relatability to each other. To take responsibility and then clear on what you want. So I think, you know, you talk about identity, you talk about some other things, and you talk about shame, breaking free from shame also, which I want to talk about too. So taking responsibility, why is that important? Why is it like crucial to get in the mirror, get honest with yourself, and really start owning some of the junk, even, you know, if things happen to you that weren't your fault, right? I get it. But let's be honest, there's probably some things you could take responsibility for that are holding you back. What kind of advice or what kind of taking of responsibility, why is that important?
Yeah. So as long as you live with everything being someone else's fault, the reason that my life is the way it is because my wife, because my boss, because the government, because whatever. As long as you are blaming others, then you don't have any power to affect change in your life. We believe that we are the sum of our choices. We have created the life that we are now living. And that's painful for some men to hear. But we believe that the reason that we have the marriage that we have and the relationship with our kids that we have and the career that we have and the financial situation that we have, the answer isn't out there. It's in here, that it's my choices that have led me to here. And whenever I can stand up and say, I can take responsibility, 100% responsibility for this particular thing, then now I have a powerful place to move from. So a guy might argue, look, my wife had an affair. I'm staying with her, but I'm not sure she's going to stay with me. And, it's not my fault she had an affair and da, 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 da. And, I'm just kind of, my life is a mess and my life is horrible. I would ask, where can you take any responsibility for
Yeah.
where you are right now? And part of the responsibility is he's staying in the marriage. Part of the responsibility where he can stand in power is identifying something that may have contributed to, even though it wasn't the cause, may have contributed to the affair. Naming some things in his life around what the things he didn't do that he could have, and the things that he did do that he shouldn't have. So whenever I find that place, it's yucky. It is yucky to look and go, oh my goodness, I contributed to this mess. Right? It's a yucky place to be, but it puts my feet firmly on in a grounded place so that I can move in a different and new way. When I know I have my power that contributed to that mess, now from here, I can now take responsibility to do something to move toward the life that I really want to have.
That's good. Golly, that's good. There's a reason I picked that one, because I think that's a huge thing in our world today. And I mean, it probably has been for decades, and centuries, but I think lately we've been given so many ways out of things, and everybody gets a trophy. And, back to all of the permissiveness that's out there, the conformity that's out there. I think we're just in a generation of, hey, it's not your fault. Hey, they should have never done this to you or whatever. And it gives us a way out. It gives us an excuse. I will say to that take responsibility. The reason some guys don't is now I don't have an excuse for all of my outlets, all of my sinful coping mechanisms, right? Whenever I blame somebody, then I can stay over here and feel safe. Well, I feel like like Christian men specifically, man, I think that's the worst kind of place to be, because now you've given away your agency. You've given away sovereignty when you've put that much power into something someone else did to you or didn't do for you. And God did not design us for that. Like, that's not
That's
our
right.
wiring. That's not, read the owner's manual. That's not our wiring. So, taking responsibility is huge. I mean, that's one of the first things I taught my kids is, dude, own that right now. Take raise your hand and be like, yep, screwed that up. Take the punishment, take the discipline, whatever, and move on and don't do it again. Learn from it. So I think guys, man, that's a huge hurdle. That's a huge barrier to entry for guys, because they can't actually get in the mirror and go, dude, that's you. I think there's power in that. Tell me if I'm wrong.
No, there is absolute power in it, and once you get through the yucky feeling of, oh no, I caused whatever, then now I have some power and I can move. And when I get into action, God blesses action every time, right? When we get into action from a place of responsibility, that's where power comes. You said something about bad things that happen to us. Back in my childhood, I can't say that I contributed to my mom's
Right.
mental illness and the effects of it. But here's what I can be responsible for. I can be responsible for my healing so that I don't
Hmm.
go out and cause more pain in my family and in my
Wow.
those that I lead.
Hmm.
I've often said that somebody who's walking around with unhealed wounds are bleeding on everyone around them. And they're bleeding
Wow,
on
that's
people they
good.
love, and they're bleeding on people that they lead. And so for leaders go first, I believe, and leaders need to clean that stuff up so that they can walk in wholeness and
Yeah.
lead not only at the career that they're at, but in their home and at church, etc.
Yeah. That's good, man. No, there's healing in it. And I mean, like you said, we, a lot would be prevented if we could get in the word and actually own what God says about us and our
Hmm.
identity. And we didn't get to touch on that a whole lot, but I mean, when you know really who you are and whose you are and why you've been put here, um, I've heard it said, the big four are origin, meaning, morality, destination. If you can answer those four things, that'll clarify and crystallize a lot of things about yourself, where you don't have time to sit in this blame game, this pity party, this it wasn't me, my fault, this and that and the other that handicaps. We don't have time for that. If we understand our design and our identity in Christ, He's made a way. He's made a way for us to get free and get clean of that. Now, when you talk about getting clear about what you want, I know that's a little bit of a different context as to what we were talking about, but at the same time, I don't think you can get there if you're still holding on to something about not taking responsibility. So getting clear on what you want, how do we do that? Because a lot of guys maybe feel like they're too old to actually dream again, right? And have a dream and have a vision or a purpose or a passion, or their passion's hunting and they love it because they can just unplug and go get in a tree stand and be away from everybody. What do you say to those guys who still wonder, what am I doing here? What is the point? What am I supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so if you don't know, if you don't have something to fight for, you're going to fight all the wrong battles, right? Craig Rochelle
Hmm.
said that a while back.
Hmm.
And getting clear on what I live for, it means that I'm not walking around unawake, and dead. Like there's a lot of zombie men,
True.
and I think part of it is that we have so many expectations in school and at home and et cetera as a boy growing up that whenever we become an adult, we're just looking for who's going to tell us what the next expectations are. And with
Yeah.
that, we're living from a place of what are the obligations that others have of me so that I can meet them. And I'm going through life trying to meet the obligations that, now I have a girlfriend and then a wife and now I have kids and they all are throwing their obligations. I'm doing what I think they expect of me. And we're focused on that in our career. We're focused on that at church and we don't even know what we want. We don't even have any clarity around what we want. I believe God has given each of us, each man, a specific mission, a purpose. And yes, we have the Great Commission, and yes, we have the Great Commandments, but beyond that, there's something specific that He's built you for, that your experiences in life have moved you toward, that He has gifted you with things that others people struggle to do well, that you do well naturally, and skills and abilities and life experiences, both the good and the bad, that will drive the purpose for your existence. I believe after a decade of work within Crucible, that my mission is that I create a world with healthy relationships through truth, grace, and blessing, reconciliation, and healing. And that's what I'm about. And it starts with each man first, right? To get the healing around this stuff so that they can go into their life, their world, and live authentically with their wife, their woman, their family, and lead themselves before they lead anyone else.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I mean, keep going back to that, and I keep having this image of the oxygen mask on an airplane, and they tell you to put yours on first, right?
Right.
Because you're no good to anyone else if you're unconscious. And we've got a lot of guys that are spiritually unconscious and catatonic in their relationships. So, man, this has been good, and we barely scraped the surface, but we kind of touched on a lot of the topics without getting specific in the book. But the guys can get a free copy if they email or go to Crucible Project and the website, and then put in their email address, and they can get a PDF of the Unstuck book. And it's really a good tool. I can see groups going through that. I can see, and I'm sure that's what it was probably designed for. But
Correct.
I think it's good to find a guy. It doesn't have to be a huge group. Like, find another guy to read it and go through it, and somebody you trust and you can be honest with. And man, I think real progress is made whenever the walls come down and the masks come off. And look, what do we have to lose? Like, how's it working for you so far? Is what I would say to myself. Like, how is that helping you? And it's not healing either. So thanks for coming on here. What's something you're working on that may be released next year, or is there another resource, or is there another platform that people can look forward to seeing some more of your material?
Yeah, so I'm headed to Chicago here in another month. I'll be shooting an 8-video series that goes with this, a video series for men's small groups. And I believe we're working with Right Now Media to see if they're going to be the one that carries it. But if they don't, it'll be on YouTube, and we'll get it out there for men to use. But let me challenge me, and don't do life alone, and go have that hard, courageous, conversation that you've been avoiding. And if we can help you in any way at the Crucible Project, just go on there at thecrucibleproject.org and let us know whatever you're struggling with, and we'll be glad to assist.
Very good. And I assume on the website, I haven't dug in completely to all the aspects of it, but can they go find maybe the closest group to where they reside when they go in and see where some of the groups are, or what's the best way to get matched up?
Yeah, that's it. We have all our dates through, I think, 2025 on there. 16 locations in the U.S. We'll do 60 retreats next year in the U.S. and 4 other countries, and in English and Espanol. So whatever way we can support them, we want to do that. If you know a guy, if you know a guy, maybe you're like, that's not for me. I don't know a guy. Let them know about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's been an honor to have you. It's been absolute gold talking about some of the stuff, and love your background and your credentials in the counseling world, because it gives some credibility and it gives some context and really some meat to the bone to some of these topics. And so I really appreciate your expertise on it. Audience, he has been the one and only Roy Wooten. We've been last in line. Be blessed.